Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our U.S. Embassy virtual conversation. My name is Leland Lazarus. I'm from the U.S. Embassy, and I've been in the region for the past year and a half, and we have an incredible program for you. But first, I just want to say, for everybody out there in the region, I hope that you and your family are still staying safe and healthy in the midst of this new spike of COVID-19. I hope that everybody is still following COVID-19 protocols like wearing masks and social distancing, and also participating in great virtual programs like ours. Today, we are celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And that is a time for us to celebrate the wonderful legacy of an incredible human being, a man who was born in Georgia, became a preacher, and then became a national and global leader for civil rights. In 1963, in his speech in the March of Washington, he encouraged the United States to rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are created equal. But Martin Luther King was also a supporter of youth activism. He saw the hundreds of thousands of young people who took part in marches and took part in sit-ins at restaurants where they were segregated in order to demand equal rights. And also the young people who took part in freedom rides, got on buses throughout the South in order to serve for human rights. And one of my favorite quotes from him is, "Life's most urgent and persistent question is, what are you doing for others?" We have an incredible panel today of young people from Barbados and St. Lucia who are in the business of doing good. And so before we introduce our panelists, I want to introduce our moderator, and she's also the brains behind this whole operation, the person who created this program. Her name is Tushatha Jeffrey. Tushatha is CEO of Jot and Tittle, a company that provides technical writing, coaching services for companies and individuals. She is one of the outgoing CARICOM youth ambassadors, and she has extensive expertise in linguistics, writing, public speaking, and youth activism. She was also recently participated in one of our U.S. Embassy flagship exchange programs called the International Visitor Leadership Program, where she met and networked with dozens of young female entrepreneurs throughout the Caribbean, throughout Latin America, and even as far as South Africa. And so without further ado, I give to you, Tushatha Jeffrey.
Thank you very much, Leland. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. We are going to have a great discussion, and it's going to be focused on ensuring that young activists like you or like someone you know has access to the information that they need to start an organization or to make their organization run more smoothly, run more efficiently, get funding, get access to resources, a lot of different things that are necessary to make sure that we're doing good and we're actually making that change in the world that we want to see. Our panel today is incredible. It consists of young people from Barbados and St. Lucia, as well as a representative from one of the region's largest funding organizations to help talk us through this process of doing good and that business behind it and how to make sure that we're doing good well. So I would like to now show you the panelists that we have and let each of them introduce themselves to you and tell you more about their organizations and what they do before we get started. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So we can begin with Shay Grenich, who is the founder of the Deaf Heart Project. Shay, if you can introduce yourself and your organization.
Thank you so much for having me here. Once again, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to Bonnie Leonce, who is here supporting the deaf this morning with sign language and interpreting. I'm happy to be here and share a little bit about myself. My story is kind of a unique one. It started with some tragedy, but turned out into be something quite beautiful. A few years ago, I got into a car accident and I broke my foot. And that was the first time that I had a situation presented to me where I was introduced to members of the disabled community. And it was through that experience that I realized that I could communicate with everyone else. I could talk to persons who were blind, persons with cerebral palsy, persons in wheelchairs who use wheelchairs. And then I realized that there was a group of individuals in the corner that I could not talk to because they were deaf. And it was from that experience that I decided there's something really wrong with this. And I started learning sign language thanks to Bonnie Leonce. I started going to classes there. And through the classes, I started to learn about their daily struggles and their challenges and just the amount of underrepresentation and marginalization that occurs within this particular group of society. And it was from that I decided I have to act now. So I used my platform while entering the Miss World Barbados pageant to bring visibility and awareness to the deaf. And I ended up winning and representing Barbados in London at the 69th Miss World pageant. And that was where the deaf got even more recognition. And it was such a joy for me to be teaching girls sign language every day, everything that I knew, sharing more so people could become sensitized to their daily struggles, and ultimately signing on the big stage at the grand finale at Miss World. So that was beautiful for me.
Thank you so much, Shay. That story was awesome. I had goosebumps listening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Next, we have Farana.
Hi, thank you again, and happy Martin Luther King Day. As she said, I'm really happy to be here and to have a panel on a day that is so important towards service and helping others. So thank you. For me, I'm Farhana Bubuya. I am the founder of the Barbados Association of Muslim Ladies. We were founded in November 2010. So last year we would have celebrated our 10th anniversary, our big 10 years. Really, the association came out for me out of frustration at the time. I had just started university and I had gone to university straight from secondary school. So I was only 16 years old. And when I went to university, there were very little girls there who looked like me. And I often felt that there wasn't a space for girls who dressed like me, who, thought like me, were brought up in a faith or a culture like I was. And so I really felt that girls needed the opportunity to experience life, to be themselves, to create, to speak up, to be able to share their thoughts and ideas and the issues without being judged. And so I created BAML as a way to bring that space to my community, to women and girls, and to begin to look at issues such as mental health, gender-based violence, education, employment, discrimination, and do that in a way that shows the world that Muslim women are here. We're here to speak. We're here to show up. We're here to be allies, and you can't silence us.
Love it, love it, love it. Honestly, when I say that this panel is incredible, this panel is incredible. We're going to have such a great discussion. So we have one of the mental health activists, one of the foremost mental health activists in the region with us today, Trey. So you can go ahead and introduce yourself and your organization.
That's making me blush already. Hi, everyone. My name is Shay Grenich. As has been mentioned before, I am the founder and the director of Talk to Me, and we're a youth organization looking to promote awareness of mental health and illness. And like Che, this is something that was very much born from my personal experience. My mom died when I was 16, going on 17, and that really sent me down a spiral in terms of my mental health. And In that experience, I realized that I really didn't have anywhere to turn to, doubly because, in the Caribbean, as men, you're not taught to be vulnerable, you're not taught to express your emotions in a healthy way. So I found that a lot of people weren't understanding and accommodating of my struggles. So after a while, I realized, well, hey, there not just me, but there are far too many young people out there who go through these struggles who don't even understand what mental health entails and how to address the problem with their mental health. So I guess I wanted to be changed. I wanted to see, and I found it taught to me to teach people about mental health and to give young people the quote that if you're struggling, it doesn't make you any less human, it doesn't make you any less worthy, and above all else, you can heal with the right help and the right resources. So that's definitely my defining passion for young people and their mental health.
Thank you so much, Trey, for sharing, and thank you for being honest, and thank you for starting Talk to Me.
No problem.
Our lone St. Lucian, who is representing very big for our sister islands, is Chelsea Foster of Girls of a Feather. Chelsea?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you again for inviting me. It was great hearing the stories of the other panelists. But I am the founder and executive director of Girls of a Feather St. Lucia. We are a mentorship and advocacy group for adolescent girls here in the country. So similar to Farhana, I really thought that there needed to be a space where girls can have conversations relating to gender-based issues. And unless in St. Lucia, you either go through the system, you don't really have that sort of access to mentors, I would say. And I grew up surrounded by very strong, powerful, confident women. And I just wanted girls who did not have that sort of access to have that similar experiences and to be given equal opportunities, I guess, in different aspects of their life. So I founded the organization back in 2014 with the help of some friends and some family. And we have been going ever since.
Thank you very much, Chelsea. So the theme for today is understanding something that happened to you or an experience you went through and utilizing that to change the world. I love that so much. So we also have Clinton White of the USAID, and he's here to assist us with finding opportunities for funding. Clinton?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for being on such a distinguished panel of youth activists. It really makes my heart feel good about this, especially celebrating on a day of Martin Luther King Day, as we celebrate his birthday, which is January 15th, but also his work that he had done. And as Leland mentioned earlier, his March on Washington back in 1963 was really a moving and telling, because it was basically around social justice, equality, as well as jobs and economic opportunities. And when they had the 25th anniversary, it was around the same theme. And then on the 50th anniversary in 2013, it was again on the same theme of equality and jobs and equal economic opportunities. So it's very fitting today to be here with this panel to talk about business of doing good on this particular webinar. But for me, as mentioned, I'm the regional representative for the United States Agency for International Development here in the Eastern and Southern Caribbean. We cover 11 countries in the region, the 6 OECS countries, as well as Barbados, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, Suriname, and the Bahamas. And being here and covering these 11 countries, our purpose is to help and support these countries with economic, with democracy and good governance, education, but specifically working with the youth as well, helping the youth in areas of security, helping the youth to find and whatever it is that they're dreaming or whatever it is that they're hoping to do, how do we help them to realize these through our programs and activities? And so, again, I'm very happy to be here. And when I was younger and not all that old, but I also was involved in a number of youth activities. I was in the youth NAACP, as well as president for a Black student union at the college that I went to. So being involved in helping to make sure that everyone is treated equally and fairly, and that we all know that we are valued and worth something. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So as you can see, as I mentioned, we have an incredible group of individuals who are going to be speaking to us today. So one of the reasons that I wanted to have this webinar and to have this discussion was because while I was CARICOM Youth Ambassador, I realized that there were a lot of young people who they're doing really good work. They're working hard in their communities. They're effecting change, they're getting things done, but they're not sure how to formalize their organization. And as we know, as the panelists will discuss shortly, formalizing your organization is a big part of getting access to funding. It's a big part of getting access to events or occasions or organizations that can help you further your mission and further your goal. So we're going to be talking today about that. And that is the perfect segue into the first question I have for the panelists. How did you formalize your organization? Just briefly, in the legal sense and in terms of making sure that it was registered, what was that process like for you? After you had the idea, how did you now concretize it? And I'll ask Chelsea, actually, because Chelsea's our Eastern Caribbean representative. And I know the process may be a little bit different, but Chelsea, and actually, I would like to lob that to Farana as well once Chelsea's finished, because Farana, I think, probably has the oldest organization out of all of them that are represented right here. So Chelsea and then Farana.
Okay, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. When I just started out, I met a few young ladies via social media, and we wanted to try to meet and start organizing. And one of the places we needed to use was a community center, and the only way you could use it was an organization.
Chelsea, can you just go through that part again? I think the internet had an issue and we weren't able to hear you clearly.
Oh, sorry. So one of the ways that we needed, we were trying to organize our organization. We needed to meet to host events and community organizing, etc. And we needed to be registered. So in order to use this space, basically. So we were advised to meet with the Ministry of Youth and Sports in St. Lucia, where you needed to provide a list of members, executive committee. You needed a projected cash flow in the event that you may not have raised any funds at the time. And you needed to fill out the application form. So starting off as a youth-led, grassroots, community-based organization, it was a very simple and very easy application process. So you get certified, you get a certificate with the Ministry of Youth Development. From there, we also went on to register with the Ministry of Social Transformation. That's more community-based. So we have that registration as well. That certificate is very important because you need that to now go on to register legally in St. Lucia. So that's being registered and being incorporated through the Registry of Companies in St. Lucia. So you first need to submit your request for approval for a name search. So you provide 2 to 3 options, and then you provide the list of required documents that they would need. So they will ask you for things like your constitution, your bylaws. Each director needs to get police records. You have to provide your financials. You have to provide details of the objectives of your organization, how you plan to give back, where you're contributing, whether it's education, community, etc. And of course, how you plan to sustain yourself. How do you plan to get money into the organization? So once you've submitted these documents to your to the Attorney General, they have an interview with you and your director. It's then approved and sent back to the registry of companies. And once all the documents are processed, you're good to go, and you go forth and flourish with your nonprofit. So that process took about a year to become legally registered, of course. But with the youth in sports, it takes a matter of days, about a week. But to be legally registered as an incorporation, it will take about some time. I will say for sure that in terms of the financial aspect of it, I would advise young persons to get, if you're looking for directors and persons to assist you or advisors, make sure that somebody has maybe a legal background, because that can cost you anywhere between $3,000 to $5,000. So fortunately for us, we were able to get a lawyer. My mom is a lawyer. You can have a friend who's a lawyer, somebody come from the community. They can assist to do some pro bono work with you and waiver that legal fee. So all you end up paying is like just stamp duties. So the cost-wise, we were able to waiver that with the help of a lawyer. But that process just took us about a year to do, because you have to wait on the registry to approve, you have to wait for interview dates and everything. So that kind of was our process in terms of formalizing. We started off as a youth-led community group, and just for the legal purposes of actually being recognized as a nonprofit, we went on to getting incorporated.
Okay. And I saw Fiona nodding a lot while you were speaking. In fact, I saw all of the panelists nodding a lot, like it's a process that they're very familiar with. So Fiona, did the process that you had to go through for BAML, did it mirror a lot of what Chelsea mentioned?
Yeah, it was very similar in specific areas and a little bit different. So one of the first things that we had to do was determine whether we wanted BAML to be registered as a nonprofit or a charitable organization. And in Barbados, there's a difference between that. One of the differences is that to register as a nonprofit, it takes a lot more financial resources than to register as a charity. And then there are just certain legal ramifications with regards to, perhaps if you look at the trajectory of your organization and where you want to go with it, that will determine your choice of whether you want to do nonprofit or charity. So for us at BAML, we opted to register as a charitable organization. And it took us about 2 years to build out the constitution, because one of the things that you would have to do when you want to register as a charity is to complete the form, which is accessible via Kaipo, the Kaipo page, and you can download that form quite easily. And once you complete the form, it has very basic information on it, like your mission, your objectives, directors, etc. Then you attach your constitution, and building out a constitution takes a long time, depending on, of course, how involved you want the membership to be, or your executive team to be, or what you want it to look like, and how you want the charity to run. So for us, it took us about 2 to 3 years. And then we did have to get a lawyer involved. And like Chelsea said, that can be very expensive. So I was able to find a friend, and she was able to review. And that process then takes some time as well, because the lawyer will review, send back comments, and you have to meet as a team again and go through that process again. The longest wait, however, has been after we've submitted this documentation to Kaipo. So we would have submitted the documentation last year in January, and it's just been a constant follow-up with the office to see where it's at, what's happening, and perhaps because of COVID-19, things are not running as smoothly as they should be. So we're really waiting on feedback for that. So it's important for charities or just organizations or young people to be aware of that wait time, especially if you are hoping to get your registration in to apply for funding. And that has just been one of the longest waits, considering that we thought this process would have been a lot faster after we've submitted all the documentation. So that has been our process at BAML.
Okay.
And Toshatha, if I could just interject here, everything Rahan is saying is so true, because we kind of went through the same process as well. We're only a year old and a couple months, but we were able to get our registration complete. in a shorter space of time. And I just wanted to give a couple tips to individuals who don't have access to a lawyer, because I didn't use a lawyer at all. So what I did first, I would advise you to, well, this is for Barbados, to go on CAIPO's website and read the Charities Act. Like, go through all those clauses and understand what it is you're getting into. When you're developing your constitution, you will need to make sure that you have certain clauses from the Charities Act into your constitution. So for example, you need to have the objects clause. You need to pick out which objects are specifically for your organization. Make sure you have that in. And you also need to make sure you have in the dissolution clause into your constitution as well. And it's really just a lot of different little fine minor details that really get you a lot of back and forth with CAIPO. So for example, for me, when you're doing your application, make sure that your constitution at the end has all the signatures that you need. Their names have to be in full. Make sure it's a first, middle, surname. Make sure the address. Make sure it has the country of residence at the end. It's those really small, finer details that could get you back and forth at CAIPO 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. So you want to make sure you pay attention to that. If you have no clue how to write a constitution, there are samples that you can find online. You could go to the UK Charities Commission, go on their website, and you'll see samples of how to set up your constitution and what you need to make sure that you have. It's just about figuring out, how do you want your organization to run? Do you have meetings? Do you have membership? How about your trustees? What's the process for appointing them? How about resignation? How will the finances be managed? So those things you can kind of get some help online with reputable organizations, and just going and reading that Charities Act so you know exactly what to do. It will still take some time. I mean, like 6 months perhaps, if you really can fine tune all those details, but it's super important and it gives your organization much credibility.
Thank you. Thank you. So I did not know that. I didn't know that the process took that long, right? I didn't know that it was that extensive, but it makes sense. We have to, have certain things in place if we want to make sure that our organizations are running efficiently and are running well. So Trey, I know that you're the youngest in terms of your organization. So I saw your look of like, I'm learning a lot as well.
Yeah.
So now you know what to do. Now you know what you guys have to do.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for being so clear about the process. And I think that will be useful. So I really hope that the viewers are taking copious notes, because, there was so much that was said that I think will really go towards assisting with that process whenever you begin that process. So now we've talked about the legal aspect of it. We've talked about registering your charity, and now you have your name is registered. Hopefully at some point very soon, Farana, BAML will have the CAIPO registration down. How do you go about accessing funding? What organizations have you found throughout the time that your organization has existed that have been the most receptive to funding requests? And what types of organizations do you think you should go to, not just necessarily for funding, but for other types of support, whether it be a space to hold an event, or something like what the U.S. Embassy is allowing us to do now, where they're giving us a virtual platform to do a knowledge sharing event? What types of organizations do you all rely on heavily?
Anybody wants to go first?
You can go first, Chelsea.
Okay. So the first 5 years of us functioning as an organization, we had no funding. I was very just much focused on doing the work and just not having to rely on money. Our sales were making like $800, and we were fine with that. We might write let's go to courses for 1,000,
Chelsea?
2,000, and get that.
Sorry to interrupt you. Your connection is not very clear. Your connection is not very clear. So
can you hear me?
We can hear you, but it's breaking up. So it's kind of jumbling together and then slowing down again and then jumbling together. So I'm not sure if you try maybe a little bit slower, you can try that. Let's see.
Okay.
I really want to hear what you have to say.
So, so just of course, let me know if you're having difficulty again hearing me. So we started off just doing simple fundraisers for the first 5 years of functioning, requesting sponsorship from corporations and here and there maybe accepting membership fees. We later on, last year, were fortunate to get a international donor to come on board, and that was through networking with another organization actually in Barbados, where she let us know that donors are looking to work with Caribbean. I'm breaking up again.
Yes. So what I'll do is I'll move over to Shay, and I'll ask you to just type your response, and then one of us will read it out, so it's a little clearer.
Okay. No
Thank you. Thank you very much. So Shay, how did you find the funding aspect?
Well, for Deaf Heart Project, it started a lot with projects. So when you're starting your organization, you will find like there's a difference between programmatic funding and funding for your actual organization. So most of the times funding is going to come in when you have your organization, but you have developed a project. You've put together a project, and then you go and you seek support for a specific project. And the funds that come in for that project will, of course, have a budget that's going into all the different activities and different budget line items, and sometimes not necessarily money going directly into your organization's bank account to just sit there. It's going to be used. So for us, most recently, we would have been working with the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. And when you're starting out, you're going to find that partnerships work really well. It's going to give you a leg to stand on, and it's going to have that additional support that you will need, because you're new and you're fresh, and sometimes you have a lot to learn in this process. So we've worked with FICA before, and for me, any benefit that comes for Deaf Heart Project is when it directly benefits my deaf colleagues. And so for me, it was really great to have my deaf friends involved in this program and even be able to employ one of our participants as well, because funding is great, but impact matters more. And that is what I hope that any individual who's starting a charitable organization is really interested in, how you're actually changing lives and making a difference to their everyday, daily situations. But what I can say where funding is concerned, part of your registration process, well, for those in Barbados, I would advise you to go register your TAMIS number. Call Barbados Revenue Authority if you need any guidance or any instructions. Get your TAMIS number, because donors who are giving you money need to be able to claim back their tax return. And that is something that is fair to them. And just make sure that you're as upright and as legal as possible. You can go on Barbados Revenue Authority's website and register, get your TAMIS number. But if you have any issues, they're always great to call, and they're really helpful, I've found.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Trey, go ahead.
Yeah, Chair, on that note, I just want to ask you, because you noted that there's a difference between getting funding for like a project and then for your overall organization. So on the note of a project, in terms of the actual pitch that you may have had to make, well, I should ask first, did you have to make a specific pitch? And if so, was it any form of like you had to take up a proposal document and submit it, or did they tell you to come and do a presentation and pitch your ideas to them? Like, which one?
Well, it's a bit of both, because if you have a really strong digital presence, you will get individuals coming to you who want to work with you. They might have an idea coming up and they might say, you know what, we want to include the Deaf Heart Project on this for the month of February because, you know, it fits in with their corporate social responsibility and an upcoming event or project that they have in mind. But because you're the individual with the organization, you kind of know what the needs are for your specific group, and you develop a project surrounding those needs, because it's about what problem are you solving. You know, your organization is solving the problem. What's the problem you're solving? And you can develop various projects surrounding that. And what I do write project proposals, and my team will help me with that. And then it's all about identifying specific funders who you think align best with what it is you're trying to achieve through your project. For Hannah, looks like she has something to share there too.
Yes, I was just going to go over to her.
Yeah, no, I was definitely listening to Shay, and I think that I definitely agree with what she's saying. And I had a slightly different perspective, especially for viewers who may be working in areas where there's less support, I think, for the issues that you're looking to tackle, as well as the target for the persons that you're looking to you know, have benefit from what you're doing. So just for, you know, offering a different perspective for viewers who may be feeling like, you know, no one is willing to support this idea because it's a new idea. It's with a community that is less represented, and they may not get as much visibility for the work for putting in and the work they're doing or the work they're supporting. And those are one of the things that I had to grapple with very early on, that really, as a minority group in Barbados, no one necessarily wants to contribute, or at least I thought no one wants to contribute towards the empowerment of Muslim women. Like, you're not going to get big banners, you know, incredible visibility, you know, the amount of women that you're quantifying, it doesn't make sense for donors sometimes. So one of the other perspectives that I wanted to offer was that strategize who your partners are, and there are ways to get funding from multiple groups that then add up. So as opposed to going to one donor and seeking this large amount of funding, there's ways to deal with private sector and other NGOs who have pockets of funding as well, or grants they can give, as well as then development agencies. And even though it may be smaller, you know, grants or funding opportunities, it then provides a lot more, you know, together it can provide something for you to then build on. But it's very important to strategize who may be, you know, more aware of certain issues. And what we did is, you know, looking at newspaper articles, looking at company profiles, seeing, okay, they've spoke about women empowerment here, they're also doing work, this company does work in certain regions of the world, so they may be more sensitive to certain cultural and religious issues. So then you can go and you can speak to them about specific things and get certain types of access to certain types of funding that way as well.
Thank you very, very much, Fiona. That was, I love the idea of actually looking into what's going on, the current events in newspapers, and finding people who fit. Sometimes you have to find somebody who fits with you rather than looking for where you fit. So I really appreciate that. Chelsea said that feminist funding from the UK, the US, and Canada, different feminist organizations, are very flexible with youth-led and women-led organizations, and they don't necessarily need you to be legally registered. So if you are in the process within that 6 month to year-long period of getting your registration and getting your organization incorporated, but you still need funding to get that work done, you can look to the US, the UK, and Canada. So thank you very much, Chelsea, for that suggestion. So we've spoken about the legal part, we've spoken about the money part, but now let's talk about how we do things like this, how you network with other activists. And I'm gonna hit this question at Trey, because we actually met at the Caribbean Congress on Youth and Adolescent Health in Trinidad in 2019. And so that now blossomed into this, where I could, think about him to be part of this panel. So Trey, and I saw you there, networking with people and talking to everybody. So how do you, you're a new organization. How do you interact with and get those connections, build those connections with other young people in Barbados, the region, and the world, really?
Well, for me personally, I like to say that networking is a skill I still have to refine, I would admit. But as of now, I found that what's worked for me is just being out there, like being unapologetic about your passion and your desire to change the world. As you introduced me as a mental health advocate, I literally call myself a mental health advocate. So I'm always listening around. I'm always looking around to see what's happening in terms of mental health. Like, are there other young people out there? And the answer to this is yes, that are just as passionate about mental health and doing something about mental health. And then the conversations start to flow from there. So it's like, well, this is what I'm trying to do. Are you doing something similar? Let's swap social media profiles and then we could work from there. But I also found that because of the profile I built for myself as a mental health advocate, I tend to get a lot of recommendations as well. People do, even people that I haven't met before, a friend would mention me to them. So like I did a project with UN hosts here in Barbados the other day, and I didn't know the person who approached me, but they told me that everyone that they asked basically recommended me because they know how passionate I am about mental health. So I'm saying all of this to say that being out there with your passion, letting people know this is me and this is what I want to do and change in the world, even that could be a powerful tool in terms of networking.
Thank you, Trey. Anyone else have any suggestions in terms of Farana? I know that you've were a recipient of the Queen's Young Leaders Award. And I know that during that time, you probably interacted with other young people who were there to get the award as well. How did you find that process in terms of networking on behalf of BAMO?
I'm gonna follow Trey and say networking is so hard. Networking is a skill that you have to develop over time and you hone, but definitely be out there. And it's always good. I always find it better beforehand to kind of think about who's going to be in the room and learn a little bit about who is going to be in the room, because it helps the conversation going, and it also helps you determine what you can get out of the conversation and what you think you can bring to the table for that person. So it is, I like to use the word strategy, and it sounds a little bit more complicated than it actually is, but just doing a little research helps the conversation flow a bit faster. And I would say that that's kind of how me and Shay met, and now we're great friends, so that's perfect.
Yes, so you're leading by example. I love it. And exactly what Trey said, that's exactly what he did. To me, that's how we met as well. So, this is literally the embodiment of two different instances where networking actually fostered something even better and fostered a lot of growth. And so we've spoken about your journeys as youth activists, and now we wanted Clinton to be part of the conversation because we wanted someone from the other side, right? Someone who's from the inside looking out that can share information about what to do, what types of things should you do when you're approaching an organization for funding. And so Clinton, if you would just share information, share about what the USAID does and funds, but also how the viewers who are looking to begin their own organizations can access those resources.
Sure, and thank you so much for that. No, all of these panelists have been very inspiring, and hearing their stories of how they began their business, what prompted them to do that, what inspired them to do it, and what's been driving them. And these are very key things that all fit in well with what USAID is about. We're very much about helping people, helping youth, helping women. Programs we have are also around mental health, which, as we all know, is a very serious issue that not much attention has been paid to in the past, but we're beginning to see much more because it's much needed. We work very closely with marginalized group and minority organizations and helping them to have space so that their message and their mission can also be achieved and accomplished as we go forward. And so all of these things are very much a part of what the mission and vision of USAID is. And I'm happy to be able to be here in the Eastern and Southern Caribbean to be able to help and support that in our programs and activities that we have. And what I will mention is a couple of things. USAID has what we call a New Partners Initiative. And there you should see the website for that particular access to see what that's about. But really what it is and the concept is, how do we bring in more new and smaller and minority and marginalized groups than we've had in the past? Rather than looking at the big entities and big organizations all the time, this is a way that we can now work more directly with smaller organizations and new partners. And so we can have a concept that people come up with. Based on that concept, we can work together, what we call a co-creation, to work out that particular idea and concept, and then turn that into an activity, a program going forward. And so that's, some of the things that we've done here in the past and that we're going to continue to do to help bring in new partners and organizations such as the ones that you've listened to today. Another funding or another way of working with us is through what we call our Local Works program. And this is our USAID flagship locally led development program, which means local people like yourselves take the lead in the development process, including priority setting, decision making, management, and more. And we recently ended a Local Works program that we held here in the Eastern and Southern Caribbean, where we had worked with through our implementing partner Research Triangle International, about 160 organizations throughout 10 Caribbean countries here in the Eastern and Southern Caribbean. And in that particular program, through trainings, mentoring, and grants, we help bolster the capacity and connectivity of NGOs, which enable them to strengthen and expand their partnerships, which is something we just heard about in terms of networking. We also help them mobilize and diversify their revenue and improve services. So ultimately, this program helped NGOs to better achieve their organizational missions and support national development goals. And the success of this program, really is, listening and hearing, what are the issues that are taking place? What are the needs that the youth and others see, and how then we can also support and collaborate with you and be able to achieve those goals. And, one of the things through our Local Works program that just ended, and hopefully, we'll be trying to do something else similar to this, is that we worked with the youth, we worked with HIV age group, LGBTI, gender, and the environment, all critical areas to supporting national and regional initiatives that reduce youth involvement and crime violence, as well as finding them employment and building the capacity of our organizations. So those are just, 2 examples of ways that we can work together, but I also look to you all to go to our website, to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and for us as we participate in important events like this webinar to get those messages out. What I can just say, just highlight very briefly, 2 organizations that we did work with that were supported through this program was the Guyana Economic Development Trust, and then there's also the Barbados Youth Business Trust. And so I just wanted you all to know that, the groups that we work with are not groups that, are all these large international, but these are the ones that matter the most, that are helping the community, working in the community, and supporting the community. And so anything that I can do to be supportive to you all, please let me know, and I try to do as much as I can. And then just lastly, one of the things that I want you all to take away from this also is that as we move into 2021 and beyond, one of the things that we are going to create is a youth advisory council. And we're trying to figure out what that means and how we want to go forward and implement that. But we will be reaching out to youth and others to be part of that and helping us to have a voice on the type of programs that we implement, to have a voice on the things that we're doing, but also to be able to work with us as we go forward. And I'll turn it over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clinton. I wasn't aware of all of the things that USAID has done, even though I, looked you all up at some point. So that's really, really useful to know. And I really hope that the panelists, but also the viewers, some of the viewers will reach out to you all to see how you guys can be of assistance as they seek to do good. So we have a question from Facebook, and Christopher Laurie wants to know, how do you manage conflicts of interest in forming partnerships? So those of you who have partners, I know Chelsea spoke about having directors. And so if any of you have any specific answer to that question, how do you deal with the humanity of trying to do good?
I'll have a go at this one. So I think that's a really great question, and I'm sure that the others would be able to reflect on their experiences as well. But what has worked for me is just being as transparent as possible and openly communicating, the roles that you have. And if you're leading teams or part of teams, letting them know, what's happening and what capacity you're speaking in. And then when you go to form partnerships, be clear in what capacity you're coming in, because that can also be a space for contention as well. Very, very briefly, one time I had set up a meeting, and when I went to the meeting, the organization, when they started the meeting, they introduced me from another organization than the one I was representing. Although in the meeting I was very clear, this is the organization I'm here representing. So as soon as I was introduced, I had to be very clear on the table that this is what happened, and I'm actually here representing this particular organization, and these are the reasons. And then even after the meeting was finished, I had to go back to both organizations and let them know this is what happened, but this is how I rectified it, just in case anything happened. So just being transparent and openly communicating is key.
I agree with Farhana, because it kind of gets a bit difficult when you wear a lot of different hats. Which one are you wearing for this specific partnership? Externally, though, when you have another organization, of course, as Farhana said, you want to make sure that you are clear and transparent about everything. Roles and responsibilities need to be defined. And I always find it best to have things in writing. Memorandums of understanding, memorandums of agreement. Have your stuff in writing. Trust me on this one. Internally, though, as you were asking Chelsea about directors and like the human element in all this, I would say that your constitution can help with that. Your constitution actually should have in a section that deals with conflict of interest, how it's going to be resolved. So you can kind of have everything in writing to know how you're going to manage and deal with any conflicts if they should arise. And of course, being very clear. If you have your directors, you send out your invitation to your director to be a director, and you are listing their roles and their responsibilities and what you expect from them. So I find communication for sure, and then having things in writing is the best way to go where conflict of interest is concerned.
And I just want to hop on quick in terms of like the personal aspect of things. I think sometimes, at least in my experience, I realize that sometimes my own personal values have potentially fed into conflicts of interest. And there was actually one instance where, had I not checked myself, I would have lost out on what turned out to be a really good partnership. I don't want to go into too many details, obviously, because Barbados is a very small country. But at first, I was like, I don't know if I want to like come and speak and like give this presentation in this contest. But then I realized, well, Trey, focus on the bigger picture here. We're trying to create awareness of mental health, and you can't like let your own personal values and your own convictions get in the way of that. And it wasn't like the people that had invited me were like these evil people. That was just my own personal conflict. So then I had to put that aside and say focus on the bigger picture here. And again, it turned out to be a really, really good partnership. So just an advice to anyone out there, just make sure that you check yourself and make sure that you're not getting in your own way and you're not getting in your mission's way as well.
I love it. That's amazing. So we have to wrap up shortly, but I just wanted each of you to sum up your journey for me. You're looking back now, whether you're looking back, a year or 10 years. What do you know now that you wish you'd known when you started your organization, when you were just young and bright-eyed and, thought the world was ahead of you? What advice would you give to your younger self as you look back? And Chelsea, I'll begin with you.
I don't know if y'all can hear me or see me clearly.
Yes, it's a little bit better. Yes.
Okay. I would just say that I think currently it's still a process we're going through.
Chelsea,
but I would definitely say investing in.
Sorry, we've lost you again. I'm sorry. Yes, it works at some point and then it starts to. Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
No. Okay. I would just say that to ensure that you invest in capacity building with your organization. Definitely, this is something we're doing now with a consultant. Invest in training in building your organizational structure, and that can look at proper governance and ensuring you have best practice in place, safeguarding measures, and all of that. Because if your organization does grow, and while your constitution may have certain things, you still want to have other policies in place. So one of the things we actually did was use the USAID assessment tool for our organization to see what we didn't have and what we need to have. And that really helped us in making sure that we can advise someone to create these processes and procedures for us. So I would say invest in that, especially when you're dealing with young persons. Child protection policies, you're now a legal entity. If you're registered with a charity, you will have financial obligations, compliance measures to meet. So just make sure that you go through you take the time. It may be exhausting, but just make sure you have these best practices in place.
Thank you very much. You broke up a little bit, but I believe that you were just saying to make sure that you have certain best practices in place and capacity building, and make sure that you are paying attention to the assessment tool. You mentioned the USAID assessment tool, I believe, that helped your organization figure out what you needed and what you had to go forward, which I think, thank you for bringing that up. That's great. So now we know that the USAID has an assessment tool, and that's another resource that we can utilize. So thank you for mentioning that. Okay, Shay.
I have to agree with Chelsea. Definitely spending time in developing your structure, your governance. But I wish back then when I started, I just told myself to take my time. Because everybody starts out the blocks. You are so full of passion, Tershata. Oh my gosh, full of energy. Like you're ready to just get going. But take your time. Develop your internal processes and your systems, because in the long run, it's going to help you be more effective and more efficient. And it's going to help you to not feel so overwhelmed, because trust me, I believe in whatever it is you want to do, and there are going to be others too. And when all that support starts coming and you're like, oh my goodness, it's just support from the left, right, front, center, back, everything. And when you don't have your system set up, you can really start to feel overwhelmed. And then for me, I have a small team right now, and everyone on my team works. This is all purely voluntary, and we love what we do. This is our passion. But having the structures internally set up, and I'm talking about your process flows, having templates already developed, all these kind of little things will help save time, and you're going to feel so much lighter going through your process. And good luck.
Thank you, Shay. Thank you. Friana?
For me, what I wished I knew then was that when it comes to governance and designing governance structures, think outside the box. We live in a society that's very hierarchical, and we tend to want to structure our organizations in that way. But there are different or newer, more explored structures of management. Look at feminist leadership models, look at agile leadership models that provide insight into creating organizations that work less on hierarchy and more on outputs and outcomes and maximizing person's potentials within your team. So
Thank you. Thank you. I love that as well. And Trey, as the youngest of the bunch in terms of your organization, your organization is still in the baby phases, but what do you wish you'd known when you first started Talk to Me?
Well, I'm going to piggyback off of what Shay was saying and emphasize the importance of having things set up internally. I've been there. You start off guns blazing, all the passion in the world, but then the lack of organization catches up to you eventually. So definitely have those templates developed. Even for social media, like managing social media is a lot more difficult than you would think. Like keeping up with the consistency, making sure you're getting the engagement, and finding people that can do the graphic stuff for you. But on a more individual level, I will say that if you do have the idea and you want to start an organization, don't disqualify yourself. You have that passion for a reason, and more likely than not, that is your calling. Even if you're struggling with the same thing that you want to fix, don't disqualify yourself. You are called to fix that by the organization that you have going in your head. So please don't sit down on the idea.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. And I really appreciate you all being so open and honest through this whole conversation. And thank you again for taking part. And thank you to the viewers for joining us. This session was supposed to inspire you, but it was also supposed to give you a reality check and help you figure out what you need to do when the passion dies a little bit because you're faced with the reality, how to make sure that that passion continues because you have the steps that you can take to ensure that your organization gets to do what you want it to do in a formal, structured way. And I really, really enjoyed the discussion. I hope that you all did as well. And I hope that you were able to learn something from it. I hope you took notes. I hope that you are paying attention to the links that are being posted in the chat and that are being posted on the screen as well. Thank you so much to our panelists. I'm going to just go over them quickly again. We have Shay Grenich of the Deaf Heart Project, Fiona Bulbilia of the Barbados Association of Muslim Ladies, Chelsea Foster of Girls of a Feather, St. Lucia, Trey Cumberbatch of Talk to Me, Clinton White of the USAID, and I would be very remiss if I did not mention Ms. Bonnie Leonce, who has gracefully and graciously interpreted this session to make sure that it was accessible to members of the deaf community. This is about inclusion. This is about accessibility. This is making sure everyone gets a seat at the table. And so we could not have this session without her and making sure that everyone could take part. So thank you very much to Shay for helping us organize that. And again, thank you to the US Embassy for sponsoring this initiative and giving us the platform to share this information. It was incredible. It was great. If you missed the first part, it will still be on their Facebook forever, I believe. So you can definitely go back and look at it again. It's something that I think will be very, very useful to anyone who is doing good and wants to find out what business they should be doing behind that well doing. So thank you very, very much to everyone who viewed and all of our panelists. And I hope that it was great. Leland?
Thank you so much, TJ. You were absolutely fantastic moderator. And I wanted to wish everybody a great week and a happy Martin Luther King Day. Take care.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.